Hello, and we're going to be continuing once again with Thomas Pynchon's The Crying of Lot 49, Chapter 2. She left Kinneret, then, with no idea she was moving towards anything new. Mucho Mas, enigmatic, whistling I Want to Kiss Your Feet, a new recording by Sick Dick and the Volkswagens, an English group he was fond of at that time but did not believe in, stood with hands in pockets while she explained about the going down to San Narciso for a while to look at Pierce's books and records and confer with Metzger, the co-executor. Mucho was sad to see her go, but not desperate. So after telling him to hang up if Dr. Hilarious called and look after the oregano in the garden, which had contracted a strange mold, she went. San Narciso lay further south, near L.A. Like many named places in California, it was less an identifiable city than a grouping of concepts. Census tracts, special purpose bond issue districts, shopping nuclei, all overlaid with access roads to its own freeway. But it had been Pierce's domicile and headquarters, the place he'd begun his land speculating in 10 years ago, and so put down the plinth of course of capital on which everything afterward had been built, however rickety or grotesque, toward the sky, and that, she supposed, would set the spot apart, give it an aura. But if there was any vital difference between it and the rest of Southern California, it was invisible on first glance. She drove to San Narciso on a Sunday in a rented Impala. Nothing was happening. She looked down on the slope, needing to squint for the sunlight, onto a vast sprawl of houses which had grown up altogether like a well-tended crop from the dull brown earth, and she thought of the time she'd opened up a transistor radio to replace a battery and seen her first printed circuit. The ordered swirl of houses and streets from this high angle sprang at her now with the same unexpected, astonishing clarity as the circuit card had. Though she knew even less about radios than about Southern Californians, there were to both outward patterns a hieroglyphic sense of concealed meaning, of an intent to communicate. There'd seemed no limit to when the printed circuit could have told her if she had tried to find out. So, in her first minute of San Narciso, a revelation also trembled just past the threshold of her understanding. Smog hung all around the horizon. The sun on the bright beige countryside was painful. She and the Chevy seemed parked at the center of an odd religious instant, as if on some other frequency, or out of the eye of some whirlwind rotating too slow for her heated skin even to feel the centrifugal coolness of words were being spoken. She suspected that much. A thought of Mucho, her husband, trying to believe in his job. Was it something like this he felt, looking through the soundproof glass at one of his colleagues with the mindset clamped on and cueing the next record with movements stylized in the handling of chrism center? Chalice might be for a holy man, yet really tuned into the voices, the music, its message, surrounded by it, digging it, as if they were all faithful it went out to. As were all the faithful it went out to. Did Mucho stand outside Studio A looking in, knowing that even if he could hear it, he wouldn't believe in it? She gave it up presently, as if a cloud had approached the sun or the smog thickened, and so broken the religious instant, whatever it might have been, started up and proceeded at maybe 70 miles an hour along the singing blacktop onto a highway she thought went toward Los Angeles, to a neighborhood that was little more than the road's skinny right-of-way, lined by auto lots, escrow services, drive-ins, small office buildings, and factories whose address numbers were in the 70s and then the 80,000s. She had never known numbers to run so high. It seemed unnatural. To her left appeared a prolonged scatter of wide, pink buildings, surrounded by miles of fence, topped with barbed wire and interrupted now and then by guard towers. Soon an entrance whizzed by, 2 60-foot missiles on either side, and the name Yoyodyne lettered conservatively on each nose cone. This was San Narciso's big source of employment, the Galactronics division of Yoyodyne Incorporated, one of the giants of the aerospace industry. Pierce, she happened to know, had owned a large block of shares, and had been somehow involved in negotiating an understanding with the county tax assessor to lure Yoyodyne here in the first place. It was part, he explained, of being a founding father. Barbed wire again gave way to the familiar parade of more beige, prefab, cinder block office machine distributors, sealant makers, bottled gas works, fastener factories, warehouses, and whatever. Sunday had sent them all into silence and paralysis, all but an occasional real estate office or truck stop. Oedipa resolved to pull in at the next motel she saw, however ugly. Stillness and four walls having at some point become preferable to this illusion of speed, freedom, wind in your hair, unreeling landscape, it wasn't. What the road really was, she fancied, was this hypodermic needle inserted somewhere ahead into the vein of a freeway, a vein nourishing the mainliner LA, keeping it happy, coherent, protected from pain or whatever passes, with a city for pain. But where Oedipa, some single melted crystal of urban horse, LA really, would be no less turned on for her absence. Still, when she got a look at the next model, she hesitated a second. A representation in painted sheet metal of a nymph holding a white blossom towered 30 feet into the air. The sign, lit up despite the sun, said Echo Quartz. The face of the nymph was much like Oedipa's, which didn't startle her so much as a concealed blower system that kept the nymph's gauze chitin in constant agitation. Revealing enormous vermilion-tipped breasts and long pink thighs at each flap, she was smiling a lipsticked and public smile, not quite a hooker's, but nowhere near that of any nymph pining away with love either. Oedipa pulled into the lot, got out, and stood for a moment in the hot sun with dead-on still air, watching the artificial windstorm overhead toss gauze on 5-foot excursions, remembering her idea about a slow whirlwind, words she couldn't hear. The room would be good enough for the time she had to stay. The door opened in a long courtyard with a swimming pool whose surface that lay was flat, brilliant in sunlight. At that far end stood a mountain with another nymph. Nothing moved. If people lived behind the other doors or watched through the windows, gagged each other with its roaring air conditioner, she couldn't see them. The manager, a dropout named Miles, maybe 16, with a beetle haircut and a lapel-less, cuffless, one-button mohair suit, carried her bags and sang to himself, possibly to her. "Too fat to frug? That's what you tell me all the time when you're really trying to put me down, but I'm hip. So close your big fat lip. Yeah, baby. I may be too fat to frug, but at least I ain't too slim to swim." "It's lovely," said Oedipa, "but why do you sing with an English accent when you don't talk that way?" "It's this group I'm in," Miles explained. "The Paranoids. We're new yet. Our manager says we could sing like that. We watch English movies a lot for the accent." "My husband's a disc jockey," Oedipa, trying to be helpful. "It's only a 1,000-watt station, but if you had anything like a tape, I could give it to him to plug." Miles closed the door behind him and started in with a shifty eye. "In return for what?" Moving in on her. "Do you want what I think you want?" "This is the Paola Kid here, you know." Oedipa picked up the nearest weapon, which appeared to be a rabbit ear antenna of the TV on the corner. "Oh," said Miles, stopping. "You hate me too." Eyes bright through his bangs. "You are a paranoid," Oedipa said. "I have a smooth young body," said Miles. "I thought you older chicks went for that." He left after shaking her down for 4 bits for carrying the bags. That night, the lawyer Metzger showed up. He turned out to be so good-looking that Oedipa thought at first somebody up there, were putting her on. It had to be an actor. He stood at her door. Behind him, the oblong pool, shimmering silent in a mild diffusion of light from the nighttime sky, saying, "Miss Moz," like a reproach. His enormous eyes, lambent, extravagantly lashed, smiled out at her wickedly. She looked around him for reflectors, microphones, camera cabling, but there was only himself and a debonair bottle of French Beaujolais, which he seemed to have smuggled last year into California. This rollicking lawbreaker passed the frontier guards. "So, hey," he murmured, "after scouring motels all day to find you, I can come in here, can't I?" Oedipa had planned on nothing more involved that evening than watching Bonanza on the tube. She'd shifted into stretch denim slacks and a shaggy black sweater, and had her hair all the way down. She knew she looked pretty good. "Come in," she said, "but I only have 1 glass. I," the gallant Metzger let her know, "can drink out of the bottle." He came in and sat on the floor in his suit, opened the bottom bottle, poured the drink, began to talk. It presently came out that Oedipa hadn't been far off, thinking it was an actor. Some 20-odd years ago, Metzger had been in one of those child movie stars, performing under the name of Baby Igor. My mother, he pronounced bitterly, was really out to capture me, boy, like a piece of beef in the sink. She wanted me drained and white. Times I wonder. Soothing down the hair in the back of his head, if she succeeded. It scares me. You know what mothers like that turn their male children into. You certainly don't look, Oedipa began, then had second thoughts. Metzger flashed her a big wry, couple rows of teeth. Looks don't mean a thing anymore, he said. I live inside my looks, and I'm never sure. The possibility haunts me. And how often? Oedipa inquired. How aware it was, those words. Now aware it was all words. Has that line of approach worked for you, baby Igor? Do you know, Metzger said. Inverarity only mentioned you to me once. Were you close? No, I drew up his will. Don't you want to know what he said? No, said Oedipa, and snapped on the television set. Onto the screen bloomed the image of a child of indeterminate sex, its bare legs pressed awkward together, its shoulder-length curls mingling with the shorter hair of a St. Bernard, whose long tongue, as Oedipa watched, began to swipe at the child's rosy cheeks, making the child wrinkle up its nose appallingly and say, "Ah, Murray, come on now, you're getting me all wet." That's me, cried Metzger, staring. Good God! Which one? Asked Oedipa. That movie was called, Metzger snapped his fingers, Cashiered. About you and your mother? About this kid and his father who's drummed up off British Army for cowardice. Only he's covering up for a friend, see? And to redeem himself, he and his friend follow the old regiment to Gallipoli, where the father somehow builds a midget submarine, and every week they slip through the Dardanelles into the Sea of Marmara and torpedo the Turkish merchantmen, the Father, Son, and St. Bernard. The dog sits on periscope watch and barks if he sees anything. Oedipa was pouring wine. You're kidding. Listen, here's where I sung, and sure enough, the child and dog and a merry old Greek fisherman, who had appeared from nowhere with a zither, now all stood in front of a phony Dodecents process footage of a seashore at sunset, and the kid sang, "Against the Hun and the Turk, never once do we shirk, my daddy, my doggy, and me. Through the perilous years, like the Three Musketeers, we will stick just as close as can be. Soon our sub's periscope will aim for Constantinople, and again we set hopeful to sea. Once more unto the breach for those boys on the beach, just my daddy, my doggy, and me." Then there was a musical bridge featuring the fisherman and his instrument. Then the young Metzger took it from the top, while his aging double, over Oedipa's protests, sang harmony. Either he made up the whole thing, Oedipa thought suddenly, or he bribed the engineer over at the local station to run this. It's all part of a plot, an elaborate seduction plot. Oh, Metzger. You didn't sing along, he observed. I didn't know, Oedipa smiled. On came a long commercial for Fangoso Lagoons, a new housing development west of here. One of Inverarity's interests, Metzger noted. It was to be laced by canals with private landings for powerboats, a floating social hall in the middle of an artificial lake, at the bottom of which lay restored galleons imported from the Bahamas, Atlantean fragments of columns and friezes from the Canaries, real human skeletons from Italy, giant clamshells from Indonesia, all of the entertainments of scuba enthusiasts. A map of the place flashed onto the screen. Oedipa drew a sharp breath. Metzger, on the chance it might be for him, looked over. But he had only been reminded of her look downhill this noontime. Some immediacy was there again, some promise of hierophany, printed circuit, gently curving streets, access to the water, Book of the Dead. Before she was ready for it, back came Cashiered. The little submarine, named the Justine after the dead mother, was at the quay, singling up all lines. A small crowd was seeing it off, among them the old fisherman and his daughter, a leggy, ringleted nymphette who, should there be a happy ending, would end up with Metzger. An English missionary nurse with a nice build on her, who would end up with Metzger's father, and even a female sheepdog with eyes for Murray the St. Bernard. Oh yeah, Metzger said. This is where we have trouble in the Narrows. It's a bitch because the Capes minefields, but Jerry has also recently hung his net, this gigantic net, woven out of cable 2.5 inches thick. Oedipa refilled her wine glass. They lay down, staring at the screen, flanks just barely lightly touching. There came from the TV set a terrific explosion. Mines, cried Metzger, covering his head and rolling away from her. Daddy, blubbered the Metzger in the tube. I'm scared. The inside of the midget sub was chaotic. The dog galloped to and fro, scattering saliva that mingled with the spray of a leak of the bullhead, which the father was now plugging with his shirt. One thing we can do, announced the father. Go to the bottom. Try to get under the net. Ridiculous, said Metzger. They'd build a gate on it, so German U-boats could get through to attack the British fleet. All our E-class subs simply use that gate. How do you know that? Wasn't I there? But, began Oedipa, then saw how they were suddenly out of wine. Said Metzger, from an inside coat pocket producing a bottle of tequila. No lemons, she asked, with movie gaiety. No salt? A tourist thing. Didn't Inverarity use lemons when you were there? How did you know we were there? She watched him fill her glass, growing more anti-Metzger as the level rose. He wrote it off that year as a business expense. I did his tax stuff. A cash nexus, brooded Oedipa. You and Perry Mason, two of a kind. It's all about you, you shysters. But our beauty lies, explained Metzger, in this extended capacity for convolution. A lawyer in a courtroom in front of any jury becomes an actor, right? Raymond Burr is an actor, impersonating a lawyer who, in front of a jury, becomes an actor. Me, I'm a former actor who became a lawyer. They've done a pilot film of a TV series. In fact, based loosely on my career, starring my friend Manny DiPresso, a one-time lawyer who quit his firm to become an actor, who, in this plot, plays me, an actor, become a lawyer, reverting periodically to being an actor. The film is in an air-conditioned vault at one of those Hollywood studios. Light can't fatigue it, and it can be repeated endlessly. You're in trouble, Oedipa told him, staring at the tube, conscious of his thigh, warm though his suit and her slacks. Presently, the Turks are up there with their searchlights, he said, pouring more tequila, watching the little submarine fill up, patrol boats and machine guns. You want to bet what'll happen? Of course not, said Oedipa. The movie's made. He only smiled back. One of your endless repetitions. But you still don't know, Metzger said. You haven't seen it. Into the commercial break now roared a deafening ad for Beaconsfield cigarettes, whose attractiveness lay on their filter's use of bone charcoal, the very best kind. Bones of what? Wondered Oedipa. Inverarity knew. He owned 51% of the filter process. Tell me. Someday. Right now's your last chance to place your bet. Are they gonna get out of it or not? She felt drunk. It occurred to her for no reason that the plucky trio might not get out after all. She had no way to tell how long the movie had to run. She looked at her watch, but it had stopped. This is absurd, she said. Of course they'll get out. How do you know? All those movies have happy endings. All? Most. That cuts down the probability, he told her, smug. She squinted at him through her glass. Then give me the odds. Odds would give it away. So, she yelled, maybe a bit rattled, I bet a bottle of something. Tequila, all right? That you didn't make it. Feeling the words had been conned out of her. That I didn't make it, he pondered. Another bottle tonight would put you to sleep, he decided. No. What do you want to bet, then? She knew, stubborn. They watched each other's eyes for what seemed like 5 minutes. She heard commercials chasing one another into and out of the speaker of the TV. She grew more and more angry, perhaps juiced, perhaps only impatient for the movie to come back on. Fine, then, he gave in at last, trying it for a brittle voice. It's a bet. Whatever you'd like. That you don't make it. That you all turn into carrion for the fish at the bottom of the Dardanelles. Your daddy, your doggy, and you. Fair enough, drawled Metzger, taking his hand as if to shake on a bet and kissing its palm instead, handing the dry end of his tongue to graze briefly among her fate's furrows, the changeless salt hatchings of her identity. She wondered then if this were really happening, the same way as, say, her first time in bed with Pierce, the dead man. But then the movie came back. The father was huddled in a shell hole in the steep cliffs of the Anzac beachhead. Turkish shrapnel flying all over the place. Neither baby Igor or Murray the dog were in evidence. Now what the hell, said Oedipa. Golly, Metzger said. They must have the reel screwed up. Is this before or after? She asked, reaching for the tequila bottle, a move that put her left breast in the region of Metzger's nose. The irrepressibly comic Metzger made cross eyes before replying. That would be telling. Come on, she nudged his nose with the padded tip of her bra cup and poured booze. Or the bet's off. Nope, Metzger said. Well, at least tell me that's his old regiment there. Go ahead, said Metzger. Ask questions, but for each answer you'll have to take something off. We'll call it Strip Botticelli. Oedipa had a marvelous idea. Fine, she told him. But first, I'll just slip into the bathroom for a second. Close your eyes, turn around, don't peek. On the screen, the River Clyde, a collier carrying 2,000 men, beached at Set El Bar at an unearthly silence. This is it, men, a phony British accent was heard to whisper. Suddenly, a host of Turkish rifles on shore opened up altogether, and the massacre began. I know this part, Metzger told her. His eyes squeezed shut, head away from the set. For 50 yards out, the sea was red with blood. They don't show that. Oedipa skipped into the bathroom, which happened to also have a walk-in closet, quickly undressed and began putting on as much as she could of the clothing she brought with her. 6 pairs of panties in assorted colors, girdle, 3 pairs of nylons, 3 brasiers, 2 pairs stretch slacks, 4 half-slips, 1 black sheath, 2 summer dresses, half dozen A-line skirts, 3 sweaters, 2 blouses, quilted wrapper, baby blue peignoir, and old Orland muumuu. Bracelets, then, scatterpins, earrings, and pendant. It all seemed to take hours to put on, and she could hardly walk when she was finished. She had made the mistake of looking at herself in the full-length mirror, saw a beach ball with feet, and laughed so violently she fell over, taking a can of hairspray on the sink with her. The can hit the floor, something broke, and with great outsurge of pressure the stuff commenced atomizing, propelling the can swiftly about the bathroom. Metzger rushed in to find Oedipa rolling around, trying to get back to her feet amid a great sticky miasma of fragrant lacquer. Oh, for Pete's sake, he said in his baby Igor voice. The can, hissing malignantly, bounced off the toilet and whizzed by Metzger's right ear, missing by maybe a quarter of an inch. Metzger hit the deck and cowered with Oedipa as the can continued its high-speed caroming. From the other room came a slow, deep crescendo of naval bombardment, machine gun, howitzer, and small arms fire, screams and chopped-off prayers of dying infantry. She looked up past his eyelids into the staring ceiling light, her field of vision cut by a wild, flashing overlights of the can, whose pressure seemed inexhaustible. She was scared, but nowhere near sober. The can knew where it was going, she sensed, or something fast enough. God or a digital machine might have computed in advance the complex web of its travel, but she wasn't fast enough and only knew it might hit them at any moment, at whatever clip it was doing, 100 miles an hour. Metzger, she moaned, and sank her teeth into his upper arm through the shark skin. Everything smelled like hairspray. The can collided with a mirror and bounced away, leaving a silently reticulated bloom of glass to hang a second before it fell jingling into the sink, zoomed over in the enclosed shower where it crashed into and totally destroyed a panel of frosted glass, thence around the 3-tile walls, up to the ceiling, past the light, over the 2 prostrate bodies amid its own whoosh and the buzzing, distorted uproar from the TV set. She could imagine no end to it, yet presently the can did give up in mid-flight and fall to the floor, about a foot from Oedipa's nose. She lay watching it. Blimey, someone remarked. Coo. Oedipa took her teeth out of Metzger, looked around and saw in the doorway Miles, the kid with the bangs and the mohair suit, now multiplied by 4. It seemed to be the group he'd mentioned, the Paranoids. She couldn't tell them apart. 3 of them were carrying electric guitars. They all had their mouth open. There also appeared a number of girls' faces, gazing through armpits around angles of knees. That's kinky, said one of the girls. Are you from London? Another wanted to know. Is that a London thing you're doing? Hairspray hung like fog, glass twinkled all over the floor. Lord love a duck, summarized a boy holding a pass key, and Oedipa deciding this was Miles. Deferent, he began to narrate for their entertainment a surfer orgy he had been to the week before, involving a 5-gallon can of kidney suet, a small automobile with a sunroof, and a trained seal. I'm sure this pales by comparison, said Oedipa, who'd succeeded in rolling over. So why don't you all just, go outside and sing? None of this works without mood music. Serenade us. Maybe later, invited one of the other Paranoids shyly. You could join us in the pool. Depends on how hot it gets in here, gang, winked jolly Oedipa. The kids filed out after plugging extension cords into all the available outlets into the other room and leading them in a bundle out the window. Metzger helped her stagger to her feet. Anyone for strip Botticelli? In the other room, the TV was blaring a commercial for the Turkish bath in downtown San Narciso, wherever downtown was, called Hogan's Seraglio. Inverarity owned that too, Metzger said. Did you know that? Sadist, Oedipa yelled. Say it once more, I'll wrap the TV tube around your head. You're really mad, he smiled. She wasn't, really. She said, what the hell didn't he own? Metzger cocked an eyebrow at her. You tell me. If she was going to, she got no chance, for outside, in a shuddering deluge of thick guitar chords, the Paranoids had broken into song. The drummer had set up precariously on the diving board. The others were invisible. Metzger came up behind her with some idea of cupping his hands around her breasts, but couldn't immediately find them because of all the clothes. They stood at the window and heard the Paranoid singing. As I lie and watch the moon on a lonely sea, watch it tug the lonely tide like a comforter over me, the still and faceless moon fills the beach tonight with only a ghost of day, all shadow gray and moonbeam white. And you lie alone tonight, as alone as I, lonely girl in your lonely flat. Well, that's where it's at. So hush your lonely cry. How can I come to you, put out the moon, send back the tide? The night has gone so gray I'd lose the way, and it's dark inside. No, I must lie alone till it comes for me, till it takes the sky, the sand, the moon, and the lonely sea, etc. Now then, Oedipa shivered brightly. First question, Metzger reminded her. From the TV set, the St. Bernard was barking. Oedipa looked and saw baby Igor, disguised as a Turkish beggar lad, skulking with the dog around as she took a set she took to be Constantinople. Another early reel, she said hopefully. Can't allow that question, Metzger said. On the doorsill, the Paranoids, as we leave milk to propitiate the leprechaun, and had set a fifth of Jack Daniels. Oh boy, said Oedipa. She poured a drink. Did baby Igor get to Constantinople on the good submarine Justine? No, said Metzger. Oedipa took off an earring. Did he get there in, an E-class submarine? No, said Metzger. Oedipa took off another earring. Did he get there over land, maybe through Asia Minor? Maybe, said Metzger. Oedipa took off another earring. Another earring? Said Metzger. If I answer that, will you take something off? I'll do it without an answer, roared Metzger, shucking out of his coat. Oedipa refilled her glass. Metzger had another snort from the bottle. Oedipa then sat 5 minutes watching the tube, forgetting she was supposed to ask questions. Metzger took his trousers off, earnestly. The father seemed to be up before court-martial now. So, she said, an early reel, this is where he gets cashiered. Maybe it's a flashback, Metzger said. Or maybe he gets it twice. Oedipa removed a bracelet. So it went. The succession of film fragments on the tube, the progressive removal of clothing that seemed to bring her no nearer nudity, the boozing, the tireless chivalry of voices and guitars from out by the pool. Now and then a commercial would come in, each time Metzger would say, Inverarities or big block of shares, and later settled for nodding and smiling. Oedipa would scowl back, growing more and more certain, while a headache began to flower behind her eyes, that they were among all possible combinations of new lovers and less clear. At some point she went to the bathroom, tried to find her image in the mirror, and couldn't. She had a moment of nearly pure terror, then remembered that the mirror had broken and fallen in the sink. 7 years bad luck, she said aloud. I'll be 35. She shut the door behind her and took the occasion to blunder almost absently into another slip and skirt, as well as a leg-long girdle and a couple pairs of knee socks. It struck her that if the sun ever did come up, Metzger would disappear. She wasn't sure if she wanted him to. She came back in to find Metzger wearing only a pair of boxer shorts and fast asleep with a hard-on in his head under the couch. She noticed also a fat stomach the suit had hidden. On the screen, New Zealanders and Turks were impaling one another with bayonets. With a cry, Oedipa rushed to him, fell on him, began kissing on him to wake him up. His radiant eyes flew open, pierced her as if she could feel a sharpness somewhere vague between her breasts. She sank with an enormous sigh that carried all rigidity like a mythical fluid from her, down next to him, so weak she couldn't help him undress her. It took him 20 minutes, rolling, arranging her this way and that, as if she had thought he were some sort of scaled-up, short-haired, poker-faced little girl with a Barbie doll. She might have fallen asleep once or twice. She awoke at last to find herself getting laid. She'd come in at a sexual crescendo in progress, like a cut to a scene and the camera's already moving. Outside, a fugue of guitars had begun, and she encountered each electronic voice as it came in, till she reached 6 or so and recalled only 3 of the paranoids played guitars, so the others must be plugging in. Which indeed they were. Her climax and Metzger's, when it came, coincided with every light in the place, including the TV tube suddenly going out, dead black. It was a curious experience. The paranoids had blown a fuse. When the lights came again, she and Metzger lay twined amid a wall-to-wall scatter of clothing and spilled bourbon. The TV tube revealed the father, dog, and baby Igor trapped inside the darkening Justine as the water level inexorably rose. The dog was first to drown in a great crowd of bubbles. The camera came in for a close-up of baby Igor, crying, one hand on the control board. Something short-circuited then, and the grounded baby Igor was electrocuted, thrashing back and forth and screaming horribly. Through one of those Hollywood distortions in probability, the father was spared electrocution so that he could make a farewell speech, apologizing to baby Igor and the dog for getting them into this and regretting that they wouldn't be meeting in heaven. Your little eyes have seen your daddy for the last time. You are for salvation. I am for the pit. At the end, his suffering eyes filled the screen. The sound of incoming water grew deafening, and upswelled that strange 30s movie music with the massive sax section. In faded the legend, the end. Oedipus had leapt to her feet and run across the other wall to glare at Metzger. They didn't mistake it, she yelled. You bastard, I won. You won me, Metzger smiled. What did Inverarity tell you about me? She asked finally. That you wouldn't be easy. She began to cry. Come back, said Metzger. Come on. After a while, she said, I will, and she did. The end of chapter 2.